Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel NPA Discovery. This is the place where we go beyond the highlight reels and the greatest hits playlists and into the real stories behind the legends. Not just what they played, but what it cost them to play it. Today we're talking about Keith Emerson, a musician so fearless that if there was a boundary, he didn't just cross it, he tried to set it on fire. And the big idea behind this video is simple, but heavy. Keith Emerson didn't merely perform progressive rock. He made it a full-contact sport, brilliant, risky, and sometimes destructive. Do I agree with that framing? Yes, mostly. But I want to add nuance right at the start. Because when people describe Emerson, they often reduce him to the stunts, the knives in the organ, the violent intensity, the explosions, the spectacle. And those moments are real. But if we only focus on the chaos, we miss the deeper truth. His showmanship wasn't separate from his artistry. It was an extension of the same obsession, to make music feel larger than life. Before we get into the story, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and it tells YouTube to recommend long-form music history like this to people who actually appreciate it. Now let's begin. When art becomes a statement and the statement becomes the story. At some point, every boundary pusher runs into the same dilemma. Do you want people talking about your music, or talking about what you did while playing it? Emerson often chose the second option, whether consciously or not. Controversial moments, especially political or symbolic gestures, can create instant headlines. They can also trigger backlash, bans, and public outrage. And once a performer becomes known for provocation, the audience begins expecting escalation. That's the trap. You do something shocking once. The crowd demands it again. And then you either escalate, or you feel irrelevant. So the performer becomes locked into a cycle of bigger gestures, louder moments, riskier choices. This is where Emerson's legacy becomes complicated. Because the stunts didn't appear from nowhere. They grew from a system that rewards spectacle. And Emerson, being Emerson, was extremely good at spectacle. Love, fame, and the cost of living like a firework. In the late 1960s, Emerson fell in love and married. And this part of the story matters because it reveals the human reality behind the myth. The stage persona and the private person are never perfectly separated. If a performer lives on edge publicly, they often carry that edge home, sometimes as restlessness, sometimes as impulsivity, sometimes as chaos, and sometimes as regret. The entertainment world glamorizes wild living, but it rarely shows the aftermath. Jealousy, betrayal, anxiety, and the slow erosion of trust. This is not unique to Emerson. It's a pattern across decades of celebrity culture. The more intense the public life becomes, the harder it is to maintain normal emotional stability privately. And Emerson's career was about to accelerate into a level of fame that magnified everything. YLP felt like a cultural earthquake. Progressive rock didn't become massive because people suddenly developed classical music education. It became massive because bands like ELP offered an emotional experience that rock fans craved at the time. Scale, drama, virtuosity, and the feeling that you were witnessing something beyond normal music. ELP gave audiences permission to see rock concerts as grand productions, not just sets of songs. And Keith Emerson, in particular, embodied that ambition. He played keyboards the way some guitarists played lead guitar, front and center, aggressive, theatrical, and technically fearless. But his most distinctive trait wasn't speed. It was risk-taking. He didn't want to be admired quietly. He wanted to create moments that people would argue about afterward. Because controversy, like it or not, is a form of cultural electricity. The backlash, tragic waste, or misunderstood genius. Whenever a new art movement arrives, critics usually split into two camps. The ones who see innovation. The ones who see pretension. ELP triggered that divide immediately. Some people saw the band as visionary, blending classical ideas with rock energy, expanding what a concert could be. Others saw it as excessive, too long, too dramatic, too showy. But here's the part that matters: both reactions can be true at the same time. A work can be revolutionary and indulgent. A performer can be gifted and self-sabotaging. A concert can be thrilling and reckless. Keith Emerson lived inside that contradiction. And in the short term, the contradiction made the band famous. In the long term, it contributed to the weight he carried privately, because when your identity is the boundary breaker, you are never allowed to have an ordinary night. Real-life example: why big personalities often burn out. Let me make this practical. If you've ever been the person in your family or workplace who brings the energy, you understand this: people get used to your intensity. They start expecting it. And eventually, you feel like you're not allowed to have a quiet day, because your quiet day disappoints everyone. Now multiply that by global fame. A performer like Emerson can begin to feel trapped by his own legend. Fans expect the stunt. The press expects the headline. Promoters expect the spectacle. And the artist begins to believe that without escalation, he is fading. This is one of the most brutal hidden costs of show business. The shadow side of spectacle, when bigger becomes a requirement. In the beginning, Emerson's outrageousness felt like freedom. He was the keyboard player who refused to behave like a background musician. He turned the stage into a proving ground, music as theater, virtuosity as confrontation. But over time, spectacle can stop being a choice. It becomes an obligation. When fans and critics start associating you with the extreme version of yourself, you begin to feel like you must deliver that version every time, or you're letting people down. This is one of the most dangerous psychological traps in performance culture. If you're calm, they say you've lost it. If you scale back, they say you're aging. If you play it safe, they say you're no longer you. So the performer escalates not always because they want to, but because they feel they have to. For Emerson, that pressure was amplified by the very thing that made him famous: his commitment to going further than anyone else. 6. The marriage strain, when fame and instability erode the home. Over the years, Emerson's personal life included long periods of strain, like so many relationships that exist under the pressure of touring, spotlight, addiction cycles, and extreme personality patterns. Here's the hard truth: love can survive a lot. But love struggles to survive unpredictability. If one partner lives in chaos, emotionally, professionally, chemically, the relationship becomes less like a partnership and more like weather. Everyone else is always adapting, bracing, and recovering. And even when love remains, trust can erode. It's not always about one dramatic betrayal. Sometimes it's about the slow accumulation of wear. Speaking about the end with care, when a life becomes too heavy. Keith Emerson's story ends in tragedy. And it's important we discuss it with dignity, not sensationalism. In his final period, Emerson reportedly carried severe physical pain and intense psychological pressure, especially the fear of disappointing fans and failing to meet the standards associated with his name. When a person feels trapped between public expectation, private suffering, and the belief that they are becoming less themselves, it can create a mental corner, one where the future looks like humiliation and the present looks like pain. No documentary can fully explain a final decision like that, because it's deeply personal. But we can say this: he was not the only artist to suffer silently behind a brave public image. And this is where we must speak directly to the audience, because this channel is not here to exploit tragedy. If you are watching this and you are struggling, if you feel trapped by pain, depression, or hopelessness, please speak to someone immediately. A trusted person. A professional. A local crisis line. You matter more than your performance, more than your productivity, more than your reputation. Because the ultimate lesson of Emerson's story is not, fame is dangerous. It's this: silence is dangerous. The aftermath, what his bandmates remembered. After Emerson's death, tributes emphasized what many musicians already knew: he was a remarkable composer, a fearless performer, and a man obsessed with entertaining, giving audiences something unforgettable. This matters because it reframes his life away from gossip and toward what he truly pursued: he wanted to move people. Even when his methods were extreme, the underlying drive was not empty showboating. It was a desire to push the art form beyond what it had been. Keith Emerson's story is not easy to hold in one hand. In the other hand, you have brilliance, innovation that rewired what rock music could be, what a keyboard could do, what a live performance could become. And in the other hand, you have pain, physical, emotional, and the silent kind that grows when a person believes they must always be the legend, even when they are suffering. Like a human being is not just the ending. It is the meaning. Because if we tell this story properly, it should leave you with more than facts. It should leave you with insight. The central lesson: genius without mercy becomes a prison. Keith Emerson's life suggests a lesson that applies far beyond music. If you demand perfection from yourself without mercy, your talent may become your prison. Perfectionism can be fuel. But it is also a form of cruelty, especially when the person experiencing it believes they are not allowed to change, not allowed to age, not allowed to struggle. And the hardest truth is, no one stays at their peak forever. Not athletes. Not musicians. Not entrepreneurs. Not anyone. So the question becomes, can you allow yourself to evolve without feeling ashamed? That question is where Emerson's story becomes deeply relevant to the viewer. A fair and honest view of his ending. Keith Emerson's death is a tragedy. It should never be framed as dramatic or inevitable. It wasn't a performance. It was a human life reaching a point of unbearable weight. We can acknowledge the likely factors often mentioned in accounts: physical pain, anxiety, fear of disappointing fans, and deep insecurity, without turning his suffering into content. What matters is not the sensational detail. What matters is the reminder: even people who look fearless can be silently drowning. And that truth should change how we treat the people around us and how we treat ourselves. The climax: what Emerson gave the world. Here is the part that deserves to be said with full respect: Keith Emerson gave the world wonder. He gave audiences the experience of watching a musician do something that felt impossible. He gave keyboards a new identity in rock. He gave progressive rock its theatrical confidence. And he gave generations of musicians permission to be ambitious, to blend genres, to build epics, to treat composition like architecture. But perhaps his greatest gift is also the most painful. His life forces us to confront what we often ignore: talent is not the same as peace. A person can be legendary and still suffer. A person can be admired and still feel terrified. A person can be celebrated and still feel alone. Empowering ending, the message to the audience. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this: you do not have to destroy yourself to prove your value. You do not have to be on every day. You do not have to be the strongest person in the room to deserve love. And you do not have to perform greatness to justify your existence. Keith Emerson chased the edge because he believed the edge is where magic lives. And yes, sometimes magic does live there. But the quiet truth is, life is not only about intensity. Life is also about sustainability. So if you are a creator, a dreamer, a builder, if you are someone who pushes yourself relentlessly, learn the lesson Emerson's story offers without asking you to pay his price. Protect your body. Protect your mind. Protect your relationships. And when you feel yourself spiraling, speak before the silence becomes dangerous. Because the most courageous thing a strong person can do is not to endure. It is to ask for help. Thank you for watching this documentary. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow, and it allows us to keep making long-form stories that respect the music and treat the human beings behind it with dignity. And I'll leave you with this: Keith Emerson proved that one person can change an instrument's destiny. Now let his story remind us: your legacy is not only what you create. It is also how you survive. I'll see you in the next one.